I stopped correcting people when they started calling me by his name. At first, it only happened once. A cashier looked at me, smiled in that automatic way people do when they think they recognize you, and said, "Hey, you're back early today." I didn't say anything. I assumed she meant someone else. That happens in a city like this. Faces overlap, routines blur. But then it happened again. And again. I live in this small apartment building where everything is slightly too quiet. The walls are thin, but no one ever seems to be home. The hallway smells faintly like detergent and something metallic like old pipes. Across from me lives Daniel. At least that's what I've always thought his name was. We've never really spoken, not properly, just the kind of passing acknowledgments that don't count as interaction. Eye contact, a nod, sometimes a brief "morning." He leaves early. I hear his door at 7:10 almost every day, a consistent, careful sound. He closes it slowly, like he's trying not to wake someone, even though he lives alone. I leave at 7:30. At least, I used to. It started with the mirror. Not anything dramatic, just something small. I noticed one morning that my toothbrush was slightly wetter than I remembered leaving it. I thought maybe I'd misjudged the time, that I'd already used it and forgotten. It happens. Routines blur together. But then I began noticing other things. My shoes were angled differently near the door. Not messy, just precise, as if someone had adjusted them to be more aligned than I usually bother with. A glass in the sink that I didn't remember using. Nothing missing, nothing broken, just small corrections. Daniel began looking at me differently. Before, his glances were brief, neutral. Now they lingered, just a second too long, like he was waiting for something. Once, as we crossed in the hallway, he opened his mouth slightly, like he was about to speak, but then stopped. "Morning," I said. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on me even as he walked past. The second week, the timing changed. I woke up at 7:10. I don't remember deciding to. There was no alarm, no reason. My body just adjusted, like it had been instructed. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, aware that something had shifted. The silence felt different at that hour, denser. Then I heard it. My door. Not opening, just a faint pressure against it, like someone standing on the other side, close enough that the wood carried their presence. I didn't move. After a few seconds, the pressure disappeared. Then, almost immediately, I heard Daniel's door open across the hall. 7:10. I started leaving earlier. It wasn't a decision I consciously made, it just felt more efficient. There's a certain clarity in aligning your routine with someone else's. It removes unnecessary friction. The first time I stepped into the hallway at exactly 7:10, Daniel was already there. He looked surprised, or maybe relieved. "Early today," he said. His voice was softer than I expected. "Yeah, trying something different." He nodded, but his expression didn't quite settle. We walked down the stairs together. Our footsteps matched without effort. At work, people began greeting me differently. "Hey, Daniel." The first time it happened, I didn't respond. The second time, I hesitated. By the third, I turned automatically. "Yes?" The word came out naturally, too naturally. The person smiled, satisfied, and continued talking about something trivial. I don't remember what. I didn't correct them. It didn't seem necessary. There's a rhythm to shared routines. You begin to anticipate movements before they happen, predict small choices, adjust without thinking. Daniel and I started leaving the building together every morning. No discussion, no arrangement, it just happened. He'd lock his door, I'd be there. We'd walk down the stairs. Sometimes he'd say something, small things, observations about the weather, the elevator being out again, a neighbor we'd both seen but never spoken to. I listened. I noticed how he spoke, measured, slightly delayed, as if filtering each sentence before releasing it. After a while, I began to match that rhythm. The impossible detail came on a Tuesday. I entered my apartment after work and found my jacket hanging on the hook by the door. I don't use that hook. I've never used it. I usually leave my jacket draped over the back of a chair in the kitchen. It's a habit, consistent. But there it was, perfectly aligned, sleeves straight, zipper centered. I stood there for a long time looking at it. Then I took it down and placed it on the chair. The next morning, it was back on the hook. I didn't mention it to anyone. There didn't seem to be a reason to. Daniel started asking me questions. Not directly, not in a way that felt intrusive, just small things woven into casual conversation. What time do you usually get back? Do you ever cook, or do you mostly eat out? Do you sleep well? I answered simply. 6, usually. Depends. Yeah. He nodded each time, like he was confirming something. One evening, I came home earlier than usual, 6 o'clock. I opened my door and stepped inside. Everything was in place. 2 in place. The chair was pushed in exactly under the table, the cushions on the couch were aligned, even the blinds were adjusted to let in a precise amount of light. I don't do that. I notice things, but I don't arrange them. I walked through the apartment slowly. In the bathroom, the toothbrush was slightly damp. I started locking my door more carefully, not because I thought someone was entering, just as a formality. The silence became more noticeable. At night, the building felt empty in a way that wasn't entirely believable. No footsteps, no distant television, just a constant low stillness. Once around midnight, I stood in the hallway. I don't remember deciding to go there. I just found myself outside my door, listening. Daniel's apartment was quiet, but not silent. There was a faint, rhythmic sound, not loud enough to identify, just enough to suggest movement. I stood there longer than I should have. Then I went back inside. The role shift was subtle. I began adjusting things before they could be corrected, straightening objects, aligning edges, anticipating the pattern. It felt efficient. Predictable environments are easier to manage. Daniel noticed. Things looked different, he said one morning as we left. Better? I asked. He paused. More consistent. I nodded. That's the idea. He started hesitating more. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence, as if reconsidering what he was about to say. Once he asked, "Do you ever feel like you're repeating the same day?" I looked at him. Everyone does. He didn't respond. The tension built slowly. There was no single moment, just a series of small interruptions, a pause that lasted too long, a glance that didn't align, a question left unanswered. One evening, as we returned to the building together, he stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "I think you went into my apartment yesterday." His tone was careful, not accusatory, just precise. I looked at him. "No," I said. He nodded, but he didn't move. "The jacket," he added. "It was on the hook." I waited. "That's where I keep mine." "I don't use the hook." "I know." We stood there for a moment. Then he stepped aside. "After you." I went up first. That night, I didn't adjust anything. I left the apartment exactly as it was. I wanted to see what would happen. In the morning, everything was aligned again, except for one thing, the chair. It was slightly off, not by much, just a few centimeters, but enough to break the pattern. Daniel didn't come out at 7:10. I waited in the hallway. 7:11, 7:12, nothing. At 7:15, I knocked on his door. No response. I knocked again. Still nothing. The silence behind the door felt intentional, like it was being maintained. I went downstairs alone. At work, no one called me Daniel. They looked at me normally, used my name. It felt
incorrect. That evening I returned at 6 o'clock. The hallway was quiet. Daniel's door was closed. I stood there for a moment. Then I knocked. No answer. The next day, the same. And the next. After a week, someone new moved into his apartment. A woman. She introduced herself in the hallway. "Hi, I just moved in. I'm still figuring things out." I nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." She smiled. "Actually," she said, "do you know what time people usually leave in the morning?" I thought a moment. 7:10, I said. She nodded, as if that made sense. The pattern returned. Slowly, naturally. I started waking up at 7:05, just to be ready. The final detail was small, almost insignificant,